So in the folder for carbon contains all the spatial inputs, and one of them is the carbon pools. And what this is showing is the megatons of carbon, or megagrams of carbon per hectare of land for each of the 4 carbon pools, and then the land corresponding to land cover type. So you can see that in above ground carbon for residential and urban development is around 18, 2, and 5. If you go down to areas where there's actual forests, you can see it's much higher, which makes sense. You're going to find a lot more carbon in wooded areas in the above and below ground biomass there. And so what the model, all it does is a simple lookup table, if you're familiar with GIS mapping terminology. It just says, okay, I have this much carbon stored in this type of pool. It looks at the land cover type, and then it translates that into a map. It looks at current and future, and then it compares the two to get the sequestration, and then we apply some economic, socioeconomic data to get the valuation component. Any questions on that? Yes.
Data format for the two places used for spatial layer. Data format.
The data format is either two. It's either a shapefile or a raster layer. So for land cover, generally we force you to use a raster layer. And I can show you what that looks like. So I have ArcGIS installed on my computer, but the good thing about the new events as well is you can use QGIS or some other open source tool. You don't need ArcGIS to look at the inputs or look at the outputs of these models. The model can run in Arc if you'd like, but it can also be viewed without it. So I'm going to show you what the land cover, you just asked the question, what is the data format of these land cover maps? And the land cover is going to be a raster with these little pixels that basically say, this is farm, this is urban, this is, roads or something like that. So if we go to the carbon storage model, this is what the land cover looks like for our sample data. And if it's a raster layer with pixels, if you're familiar with that, and essentially we're linking these individual pixels with those carbon pool information that we had to calculate the carbon storage in the current and future, and then the sequestration and evaluation. Any other questions about input layers? I know I'm going through this quickly. I wish we had more time to sort of go into details, but this is the basics. So let's go back to the tool. So back to that interface. What you're seeing here is you're just pointing to those layers on the system. So you have your future land cover map, your current land cover map, the year of the current, the year of the future. So you can look at the pay rate, the harvested wood product, and the year time to do that. This is that carbon pool itself file that's open, and then for the harvested wood product, it's an optional thing where you can provide information about current harvest rates, things like timber, as well as charcoal and things like that. So this is already filled in, ready to go. So after you check calculate sequestration, just hit run. It should take about 10 to 15, maybe 30 seconds to run this.
I'm sorry, Craig. So could you describe what the capability differences are between having ArcGIS and not having ArcGIS?
In terms of comparing the two versions of the tools, there's no capability difference. The good thing is these do not require ArcGIS and they're much faster. So we've had actual computer scientists know how to code and use good sort of coding skills to basically make these things run sometimes in the order of 1,000 times faster. So this model used to take 20 minutes and now it takes 20 seconds, things like that. So it's a great improvement in addition to being independent from Arc and not having to highlight.
Okay, so there's nothing extra for having Arc at all?
Just if you are comfortable with it, we still support it because investors are built for ArcGIS in mind. So some people like to run the bar and manipulate the inputs and the outputs. So there's no request cost progression. So as you run the model, it should be pretty quickly, and you'll get this message finished. Yes. Speak up a little bit.
When we check the box, it is in data. So the question is the default for the data on data.
This is the default sample data from the Willamette Valley, which is in Oregon in the United States. And we provide that with the install. If you're going to use your own information, then you're going to go through our user's guide, which helps you and guides you to prepare your own information. So that instead of pointing to the sample data, you would point to your own information. And run it exactly the same way. All right. So after that's done, you'll see that this pops up, and this is the screen showing your new intermediate and final outputs. And you're going to see a map in here that says sequestration. And essentially what this is doing is it's looking at the difference in carbon storage from the current to the future. It's just a simple subtraction. Sum up all the carbon in the current land cover, all the carbon in the future, and subtract the future from the current from the future. And we can add these maps to the to ArcGIS to view them. So I'll add one of them here as well.
So the result here.
If you have QGIS, it's much the same way. It's just a different interface. So you go into your carbon workspace in the output and drag that in. And then you can symbolize it using probably a better color. So we'll use the same symbols that we use for the Sumatra example, where red means loss in carbon and blue means a gain in carbon. Just so you can see. So what we're seeing here, basically, the blue areas are the gain in carbon, meaning areas where there wasn't forest, there were different types of forest, and now there's more carbon. Areas in red is generally in the future land cover, we're seeing a development, so roads, urban, things like that, and we're losing the carbon in that area. So this can show you in biophysical terms where carbon rests, just like if you are looking at Sumatra. Does that make sense? So now the second portion of this is the valuation component, where we're looking at the carbon that's sequestered over time, and we're placing sort of a value on it. And so to do that, you're going to go back to that folder Invest3, and instead of clicking on Carbon Biophysical, you're going to click on Carbon Valuation, and it'll launch the same interface. You need to have run the biophysical portion to do this optional second step evaluation. If you don't have the sequestration map, which you can see is pointed to right off the bat, that was an output of the biophysical run. So now that we have this, we can run the second one. And these are those economic parameters I mentioned before. The social or market value of carbon, in this case we're saying $43 per metric ton. The market discount rate, the annual rate of change. In this case, we're putting it at 0, which means it's no more valuable now than in the future. And then the year of sequestration, so our current land cover map at 2000, and our final year at 2030, so we know how many years to apply that discount rate. Question?
We're just a couple steps behind you. It's like
Sure. Is it just still running?
No, actually, okay. It is like a challenge. Can you?
Yes. So how to run the second part? Or how to map it?
How to run the map, absolutely.
Do you have ArcGIS or QGIS?
No, sorry. So we do have to have that.
So you have to have a mapping tool on there to visualize it. You could open, it just produces a TIFF, which is usually visible in like some sort of image software. Like I think if I open Windows, Microsoft Office 2010, it'll show up. Maybe not. Try another one. If you have like Photoshop or something, it'll load. You can see the thumbnail right here. It'll load this in it, but the benefit of the mapping software is it spatially references where this map is, right? So it's just floating in picture space if you have it here. To know actually where everything is, then you can overlay things like tiger conservation areas or biodiversity, and start comparing and weighing those different trade-offs. That's the benefit of the mapping tool, is that this raster image is actually referenced to someplace on the earth. So that's what you get out of it. I can show you how to download a mapping tool later, and then I can go over that mapping if you'd like. So just moving forward, does everybody have the valuation portion of the model opened up? And everything's checked and ready to go? So you can specify price in terms of elemental carbon or carbon dioxide. It's just important to have the units right based on the information you provide in those carbon pools. Otherwise, you're comparing apples to oranges. So when you're all set and everything's checked, just hit run.
Greg, you have a slide.
This comparison is one. I think it's one or two, but there's one main. No, this is
So again, that's a relatively quick thing. That would take another 5-10 minutes in the old version, and now it's like 5-10 seconds. You'll see the finished message, and then it'll load up this. And so now in the mapping output folder, we have this value sequest, which we can add to the map as well. So now we can symbolize this by negative to positive again. I'll just do it in green and red this time for dollars. Money tends to be green colored in the US.
But you can put it the same. Whatever. What I want to say is you can go back.
So you guys want to make sure when you visualize in the mapping software, I can give you tips inside of the various values. The negative values are in the red and the orange, and the positive values are in the green. So we can clearly see where we're gaining and where we're losing. So I'm actually going to classify this at 0. So you'll notice everything that's negative is either red or orange, and everything that's positive is either yellow or red or green. And this shows you the map. Again, if we had time, we could overlay everything to compare biodiversity or indicators and start to look at that. And if we had more time as well, we'd start to look at different scenarios. This is just one scenario, but in reality, there are multiple scenarios you might look at, you might compare them, you can take some maps and subtract them to find out which one is greater pixel by pixel basis, which one is lost. We're also looking at modeling uncertainty, so a lot of people are concerned with these carbon pool estimates, how accurate are they? We want to, in the future, you can give lower and upper bounds, and you actually do a Monte Carlo, if you're familiar with what that is, and basically get sort of uncertainty of bounds in terms of what you might expect in carbon stored under the pixel, and so our software can work on that as well. There's all sorts of things you can do with this. Given time, I'd say let's just move on, but just wanted to summarize what this model produces. Again, it's maps of current carbon storage, maps of future carbon storage, sequestration, which is just future minus present storage, and then the map of economic value of the sequester, which I just showed you. We talked about some applications. The Sumatra example you just went through would be a great example for ecosystem service trade-offs. Our first pass analysis for carbon market. Since this model is very simple, we'll go out and say it's not appropriate for precise cost benefit analysis. You're going to want to use a much more sophisticated carbon model for that. And with that, the trade-off is that you're going to need a lot better information if you want to make real world decisions on cost benefit analysis. Now that you've seen how this works very quickly, I apologize for that. This model is very similar to all the other models. So now that you have an understanding about these spatial inputs feed into this production function, we run it, and then we produce outputs. All the other models function just the same way. That same interface, you put the information in for your site, and you produce these maps and other sorts of information. Each run that we do, which we just did one run, just the biophysical evaluation, is one scenario. Or in the case of carbon, it's actually comparing to current and future. But most of the model runs, which is one scenario. So if you want to look at 4 scenarios, you need to run the model 4 times. And that's another reason why this decrease in runtime is so good, because we can run a lot more models, scenarios quicker. Results are in biophysical and optionally evaluation economic terms. We compare multiple futures and look at trade-offs and win-wins. So that's pretty much it for carbon. I know we're relatively quick. Still a good amount of time. Does anybody want to focus on something, like specifically the nuts and bolts of the model, how to visualize these in ArcGIS, how to run different scenarios? What would be the best
example that they are actually using to relocate the
Just to understand,
they move around. They get a lot.
because I see that model is setting carbon and specific components which are there on the model.
specific inputs?
Or inputs.
Yeah.
So you guys are in the process of developing social aspects, other inputs. Is that your position as far as the modeling the model is concerned? Because let me just get on this folder. I see that it's invest hydropower, for example, and different components. Are you going to add to deal with different inputs?
So yeah, sometimes we like to take a holistic approach. It's not just look at carbon and call it a day. That's it. So in a typical application like this, for example, we ran carbon. We ran a carbon model. We ran nutrient retention, sediment retention, water yield, and a few other biodiversity. And so you run all these different models for all the different scenarios, and then you start comparing and weighing different trade-offs. You can incorporate sort of social values for different things. You can use the social value of carbon in this instance for valuation. I'm more comfortable with the marine stuff, so with the marine thing, we're looking at a lot like aesthetics. So yeah, value people place in terms of aesthetic, beautiful landscape with the seascape. So the next big push beside biophysical and evaluation components is start looking at units of human well-being. And that's the tricky. It's really tough to look at a service shed, is what we call it, a flow of services. You know that the services exist is there in the landscape. We're pretty good at that. You saw that with the carbon results. But how those services reach beneficiaries, that's the tricky part. So we have a model about forest products, which include applied in Asia and Africa. And so, yeah, and that's under development right now. It's still in development. But that's a little bit easier because you actually look at that, where people go, where they travel, the cost, the distance travel to go from honey or gold, and things like non-forest products. So that's a little bit easier in terms of beneficiaries, but a lot of the hydrology stuff is very challenging. So that's something we struggle with. Not only modeling it and mapping it, but also visualizing it. How do you show all these dynamic processes and people that are involved with a map? It's not easy. So what these models represent, these tier 0 and tier 1 models represent, is sort of a first cut holistic approach to looking at a variety of different services and trade-offs. And once you get comfortable with that and you know what you're looking at and you have a better sense of what's going on in your land, your seascape, then you can either bring in other more sophisticated models or use these models to understand where your data gaps are, where the uncertainty is, and then gather better information. Go back to stakeholders, talk with them, and say, I need information on this. What do you value, social value, that you're talking about? Any other questions or areas that I kind of quickly went through that you'd like to mention?
How do we deal with uncertainties? Because you say like this information doesn't produce really proper method, but you still want to use this in the form of something, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with this uncertainty that is in these data?
Here if you go
How do you
the invest
this when it comes to
marine water quality biophysical.
So,
Do you want to use the
exact
Sorry, did you guys
It's
get
okay.
it?
right, so the question was, how do we deal with uncertainty, in particular when we're trying to, inform policy or for decision making? And that's a tricky question. I mean, as I mentioned, our team is working to basically add uncertainty analysis to all of our models, or at least when you can do uncertainty. So the first step was sort of to produce the model, and then we validated most of these models.
now we're looking to do uncertainty analysis. I can show you how carbon uncertainty might look. The way we might visualize it, let me pull up a screenshot.
So in addition to this map, which shows sort of the value, or the other previous map, maybe even better, where we're showing change in carbon storage or sequestration, we might actually overlay a map that has different hues of red, and essentially that would show large or small amounts of uncertainty based on what we know for the carbon storage pools that were provided. So instead of providing just an absolute term for, in this land cover type, you have this much carbon stored in that pixel, instead you would give a range of values. You might, instead of being 25 as an absolute, you might give 15 to 35. You know it's somewhere in that range, but you're not sure. Then the model will do a model in Monte Carlo, where essentially it'll run it 1,000 times really quickly and give you a distribution of what you might expect on a pixel by pixel basis. And then we can represent that with maps as well. So you can use an uncertainty map to overlay and say, these are the areas we're most certain about the results, these are the areas we're not so certain. So in terms of informing decision making, you're going to obviously want to focus on areas where you're most sure about the results.